The email from my neighbor hit my inbox at 2 in the morning Dubai time, and I nearly dropped my phone when I read the subject line. What the hell's happening to your property? I was Marcus Donovan Mitchell, a petroleum engineer who had spent the last 18 months working on offshore drilling projects in the Middle East. The money was incredible, the work was demanding, and I had barely thought about my house back in Scottsdale, Arizona, except to pay the bills and keep the lawn service running. My property was a decent-sized lot, about 2 acres on the edge of the Sonoran Hills neighborhood, with my house sitting on the front half and a good chunk of empty land stretching out behind it. I'd always planned to build a workshop or maybe a guest house back there someday, but for now, it was just desert landscape with some native plants and a few saguaro cacti. The email had 3 attached photos. I opened them with shaking hands, squinting at the bright screen in my darkened hotel room. The first showed construction equipment on what looked like my back property. The second showed concrete foundations. The third showed what appeared to be the frame of a building going up. On my land. I immediately called my neighbor Dave, even though it was the middle of his night too. "Marcus, man, I have been trying to reach you for weeks," Dave said, sounding exhausted. "Your phone kept going to voicemail. I have been on an oil rig with spotty service. Dave, what the hell is going on? Is that really my property?" "Yeah, it is. The HOA started construction about 6 weeks ago. They are building some kind of community clubhouse. I tried to tell them they were on your land, but this woman, Patricia, she is the HOA president. She told me they had all the proper documentation and permits. She said you had agreed to it before you left." My blood ran cold. I never agreed to anything. I did not even know the HOA was planning a clubhouse. I figured as much. Patricia has been a nightmare ever since she got elected president last year. You have missed a lot while you have been gone. She has been finding people left and right, trying to turn this neighborhood into some kind of country club community. I looked at the photos again, my heart pounding. "I am coming home. Can you do me a favor? Can you take more pictures and maybe some video of the construction? Get everything documented." "Already on it, buddy. I've been taking photos every few days. I had a feeling this was going to blow up." I hung up and immediately started looking at flights. The earliest I could get back to Phoenix was in 4 days, which meant I had to wrap up my current project ahead of schedule and brief my replacement. My boss was not happy about the sudden departure, but when I explained that someone was illegally building on my property, he understood. Those 4 days felt like 4 years. I kept in touch with Dave, who sent me daily updates. The construction was moving fast. By the time I boarded my flight in Dubai, the building had walls and a roof. It looked substantial, maybe 3,000 square feet with what appeared to be large windows and a covered patio area. The rage I felt was almost overwhelming. I had worked my entire adult life to buy that property. I'd saved and scraped, and finally, at 34 years old, I had purchased my dream lot with cash. No mortgage, no debt, just me and my 2 acres of Arizona desert. And now, some HOA president named Patricia thought she could just build whatever she wanted on it. I landed in Phoenix on a scorching June afternoon, the temperature hovering around 108 degrees. I did not even go home first. I drove my rental car straight to the construction site, pulling up to the edge of my back property where a chain-link temporary fence had been erected. The clubhouse was even bigger in person. It was a sprawling single-story building with a southwestern architectural style, complete with stucco walls painted in a tasteful beige, terracotta roof tiles, and decorative wooden beams. There were workers everywhere, installing windows and working on the landscaping. A large sign near the entrance read, "Sonoran Hills Community Clubhouse Grand Opening July 15th. I got out of my car and walked right through the open gate in the temporary fence. A construction worker spotted me immediately. "Hey, you cannot be here. This is a construction site," he called out. "This is my property," I said loudly. "I own this land." The worker looked confused. "No, man, this belongs to the HOA. We have all the permits and everything. Where is your site supervisor?" Before the worker could answer, I heard a shrill voice behind me. "Excuse me, you need to leave this property immediately." I turned to see a woman in her late 40s marching toward me. She had blonde hair styled in that particular way that screamed, "I need to speak to the manager," wearing white capris and a turquoise blouse with designer sunglasses pushed up on her head. She was holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. "I am Patricia Langford Ferguson," she announced. "I am the president of the Sonoran Hills Homeowners Association, and you are trespassing on HOA property." "Patricia," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I am Marcus Mitchell. I own the property at 4782 Desert Sage Road. This clubhouse you are building, it is on my land." Her face went through several expressions, settling on condescending dismissal. "Mr. Mitchell, I am well aware of who you are, and I can assure you all the proper procedures have been followed. This land was designated for community use in the original HOA charter, and we have every right to develop it." "Show me the documentation," I said flatly. She clutched her clipboard tighter. "I do not have to show you anything. All the paperwork has been filed with the county. If you have concerns, you can bring them up at the next HOA meeting, which is the third Thursday of next month." "That is not good enough. You are building on my property. I have the deed." Patricia actually laughed. "Mr. Mitchell, I do not know what you think you know about property law, but when you purchased your home in Sonoran Hills, you agreed to the HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions. That includes designated community spaces. My backlot is not a designated community space. It is private property. I have the survey. I have the deed. I have everything that proves I own this land." Her smile was patronizing. "Then I suggest you take it up with your lawyer. In the meantime, I need you to leave this construction site before I call the police." I wanted to explode. I wanted to scream. But I knew that would not help my case. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started taking photos of everything: the clubhouse, the workers, Patricia herself, the sign, the equipment. "Stop that!" Patricia shrieked. "You cannot take photos here." "I can absolutely take photos of my own property," I said, continuing to document everything. Patricia pulled out her own phone. "I'm calling the police. You are trespassing and harassing HOA officials." "Please do. I would love to have law enforcement come out here and sort this out." She actually did dial. Within 20 minutes, a Scottsdale police patrol car pulled up. 2 officers got out, and Patricia immediately rushed over to them, talking rapidly and gesturing at me. The officers approached me together. The first one, whose name tag read Officer Stevens, asked, "Sir, can you tell us what is going on here?" "My name is Marcus Mitchell. I own the property at 4782 Desert Sage Road, which includes this land where they are building. I have been overseas for work for the past 18 months. I came back to find this construction happening without my knowledge or permission." Patricia interjected, "Officers, he is lying. This land belongs to the HOA. We have all the proper permits and documentation. He is trespassing and taking photos of our workers without permission." Officer Stevens held up his hand. "Madam, let him finish." He turned back to me. "Do you have any documentation showing you own this property?" "Not with me right now, but I can get it. The deed is at my house, along with the survey and all my property records." The second officer, Officer Kim, asked, "And you have been overseas for 18 months?" "Yes, I work in petroleum engineering. I have been in the Middle East. A neighbor emailed me about the construction, and I came back immediately." Patricia jumped in again. "Officers, we started this project 2 months ago. We sent certified letters to Mr. Mitchell's address informing him of the construction. We followed all proper procedures. He cannot just show up and claim ownership now." "Did you sign for any certified letters?" Officer Stevens asked me. "No, because I was not here, and I certainly did not receive any letters before I left, because this project did not exist then." Officer Kim said, "This sounds like a civil property dispute. Without seeing the actual deeds and property lines, we cannot determine who is right here. You're going to need to sort this out in court or with the county." "So they can just keep building on my property while I try to get a court date?" I asked, incredulous. "Sir, we cannot stop legal construction with proper permits based on a verbal claim. If you can prove ownership, you need to file for an injunction." Patricia looked triumphant. "You heard the officers. You need to leave or you will be arrested for trespassing." I took a deep breath. "Fine. But I am getting an injunction. And I'm getting a lawyer. This is not over." I got back in my rental car and drove to my house, my hands shaking with anger on the steering wheel. The moment I walked through my front door, I went straight to my home office. Everything was exactly as I had left it, covered in a thin layer of dust. I opened my filing cabinet and pulled out the folder labeled Property Documents. There it was, my deed, recorded with Maricopa County, showing that I owned Lot 47 of the Sonoran Hills subdivision, which consisted of 2.03 acres. I also had the survey, which clearly showed my property boundaries. The back portion where they were building the clubhouse was absolutely, unequivocally on my land. I spread everything out on my desk and took high-resolution photos of every page. Then, I grabbed the physical documents and put them in my laptop bag. It was almost 5 o'clock, which meant most offices were closing, but I was not waiting until morning. I called 3 real estate attorneys before I found one who answered. His name was Michael Montgomery, and when I explained the situation, he asked me to come to his office immediately, even though it was after hours. Michael's office was in Old Town Scottsdale in a renovated adobe building. He was maybe 50, with gray hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I spread out all my documents on his conference table. He studied them for a long time, comparing the deed to the survey, pulling up county records on his computer. Finally, he sat back and said, "Mr. Mitchell, you have a very clear case here. This is your property. The question is why the county issued building permits for construction on your land. That is what I want to know. I'm going to pull the permit records right now." He typed rapidly on his computer. After a few minutes, he said, "Here it is. The HOA applied for the permits in March. They submitted a property description and a plat map showing the land as HOA common area. But it is not. It is mine. I can see that. They either made a mistake or deliberately misrepresented the ownership. Either way, it is fraud." He looked at me seriously. "We need to file for an emergency injunction to stop construction immediately. I can have that filed first thing tomorrow morning, but I need to warn you, this is going to be expensive, and it is going to take time. I do not care about the money, I care about getting them off my land." "Good. I will need a retainer of $10,000 to start." I wrote him a check on the spot. The next morning, Michael filed for an emergency injunction in Maricopa County Superior Court. He also filed a complaint against the HOA for trespass, fraud, and conversion of property. The legal papers outlined everything: my ownership, their construction, the fraudulent permit application, and the damages I was seeking. While we waited for a hearing date on the injunction, I went to the Maricopa County Recorder's office myself. I wanted to see exactly what the HOA had filed. The clerk helped me pull up all the records related to Sonoran Hills subdivision and the HOA. What I found was shocking. The original HOA charter, filed when the subdivision was created 15 years ago, did designate certain common areas for community use. But my lot was not one of them. My lot was clearly marked as a private residential lot. However, 6 months ago, right around the time Patricia became HOA president, an amendment had been filed claiming that Lot 47 was actually part of the common area. The amendment had been signed by Patricia and notarized, but it was completely fraudulent. You cannot just amend an HOA charter to take someone's private property. That is not how property law works. I took copies of everything and brought them straight to Michael's office. When he saw them, his eyes widened. "This is even worse than I thought," he said. "This is not just a mistake. This is deliberate fraud. They knowingly filed false documents to claim your property. We need to add this to the complaint, and we should probably contact the county attorney's office. This might be criminal." "Do it," I said, "all of it." The hearing for the emergency injunction was scheduled for 3 days later. In the meantime, construction on the clubhouse continued. Every day I drove by and took photos, documenting the progress. It killed me to watch them put up drywall and install fixtures on my property, but Michael advised me not to confront them or interfere. We needed to let the legal process work. Dave came over the night before the hearing, bringing beer and moral support. "This neighborhood has gone crazy since Patricia took over," he said, sitting on my back patio where we could see the clubhouse in the distance. "She's been fining people for having their trash cans visible from the street, for not edging their lawns properly, for having the wrong shade of beige paint. Mrs. Henderson, the old lady 3 houses down, got fined $500 because her porch light was not the approved HOA fixture. How did she even become president? Barely anyone votes in the HOA elections. She ran unopposed and got like 30 votes out of 200 houses. Then she immediately voted herself a salary and started acting like she owns the whole neighborhood. Well, she definitely does not own my 2 acres. I cannot wait to see her face when the judge shuts this down. The hearing was at 9 in the morning. Michael and I arrived early, taking seats in the courtroom. Patricia showed up with her own lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit named Richard Lang. She sat across the aisle from us, shooting me dirty looks. Judge Maria Hernandez took the bench promptly at 9. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with a reputation for cutting through legal nonsense. This is a hearing on an emergency motion for injunction in the matter of Mitchell versus Sonoran Hills Homeowners Association, she began. Mr. Montgomery, you filed the motion. Proceed. Michael stood and presented our case clearly and concisely. He showed the deed, the survey, the fraudulent HOA amendment, and photos of the construction. He argued that irreparable harm was being done to my property every day construction continued, and that I had a clear right to ownership. Then, Richard Lang stood up for the HOA. His argument was that the HOA had acted in good faith based on their charter documents, that they had followed all proper permitting procedures, and that stopping construction now would harm the community and waste hundreds of thousands of dollars already invested in the project. Judge Hernandez listened to both sides, then started asking questions. She asked Patricia directly, "Mrs. Ferguson, when did you become aware that Mr. Mitchell claimed ownership of this property?" Patricia stood, looking nervous for the first time. "Just a few days ago, Your Honor, when he showed up at the construction site." "Did you send him notice before beginning construction?" "Yes, Your Honor. We sent certified mail to his address." "Do you have proof he received it?" Patricia hesitated. "Well, no, he was not there to sign for it." "So you proceeded with construction on property that might have been disputed without confirming the owner was aware?" "Your Honor, we believed it was HOA common area based on our charter." Judge Hernandez looked at the documents in front of her. "I'm looking at the original subdivision plat from 15 years ago. Lot 47 is clearly marked as a private residential lot, not common area. Can you explain this amendment filed 6 months ago that claims otherwise?" Richard Lang stood up. "Your Honor, the HOA board voted to amend the charter to better serve the community's needs. You cannot amend a charter to seize private property, Counselor. You know that." The courtroom went silent. Judge Hernandez continued, "I am looking at Mr. Mitchell's deed, recorded with the county well before any of these HOA amendments. Prima facie, he appears to be the rightful owner. This court finds sufficient evidence to grant the emergency injunction. All construction on the disputed property is to cease immediately, pending a full trial on the merits. If the HOA continues construction, they will be in contempt of this court." Patricia actually gasped. Richard Lang tried to argue, but Judge Hernandez cut him off. "The injunction is granted. We will schedule a full hearing within 60 days. This court is adjourned." I felt like I could breathe for the first time in a week. Michael shook my hand. "That's a huge win. Now they cannot do anything else while we prepare for trial." As we left the courtroom, Patricia confronted us in the hallway. "This is not over," she hissed. "That clubhouse belongs to the community. We will fight this." "With what?" I asked. "Fraudulent documents?" Her face went red, and she stormed off with Richard Lang hurrying after her. Michael and I went straight to the construction site with a copy of the injunction. The site supervisor was not happy, but when Michael showed him the court order, he had no choice but to stop work. Within an hour, the workers were packing up their tools and equipment. I stood in front of the half-finished clubhouse, feeling a mix of satisfaction and frustration. Satisfaction that I had stopped them. Frustration that they had gotten this far in the first place. Over the next few weeks, I learned more about Patricia and her schemes. It turned out the clubhouse was not even the full extent of her plans. Dave and other neighbors told me she had been planning to build a community pool, tennis courts, and a fitness center, all funded by doubling the HOA dues. The clubhouse was just phase 1, and my property, with its 2 acres of relatively flat desert, was the perfect location. The only problem was it was not her land. Michael filed a detailed complaint adding counts of fraud, intentional misrepresentation, and seeking punitive damages. He also contacted the Maricopa County Attorney's Office about potential criminal charges for filing false documents with the county. The HOA's response was to dig in harder. They filed a counterclaim arguing that my deed was somehow invalid because I had not been attending HOA meetings and that my property had been abandoned while I was overseas. It was the most ridiculous legal argument I had ever heard, and Michael said it was completely without merit. But it meant we were going to trial. The discovery process was fascinating and infuriating. Through interrogatories and document requests, we learned that Patricia had handpicked an architectural firm owned by her brother-in-law to design the clubhouse. The construction company was owned by her cousin. The entire project was essentially a way to funnel HOA money to her family members. We also discovered that she had not gotten approval from the full HOA board for the project. The HOA bylaws required a vote of the entire membership for any expenditure over $50,000. The clubhouse was budgeted at $400,000. She had simply declared it approved and moved forward. Several homeowners, emboldened by my lawsuit, started asking questions about HOA finances. A man named Martin Myers, who was a CPA, requested a full accounting of HOA funds. Patricia refused, citing privacy concerns. Martin then showed up at my house with a proposal. "A bunch of us want to recall Patricia and the entire board," he said. "We need to gather signatures from 20% of the homeowners to call a special election. Will you help?" Absolutely. Over the next 3 weeks, I spent my evenings going door to door with Martin and about a dozen other fed-up homeowners. We explained what had happened with my property, showed people the legal documents, and asked them to sign the recall petition. The response was overwhelming. People were tired of Patricia's fines, her attitude, her power trips. We got the required signatures in just 2 weeks. Patricia tried to block the special election, claiming the petition was invalid for various technical reasons. But Michael reviewed the HOA bylaws and confirmed we had followed proper procedures. The election was scheduled for mid-August. In the meantime, my case against the HOA moved forward. The trial was set for September. During depositions, Patricia's story fell apart completely. When Michael asked her under oath how she determined that my property was common area, she could not give a straight answer. She claimed she had consulted the HOA charter, but when shown the original charter that clearly designated my lot as private property, she claimed there must have been an error. "So you filed an amendment to correct an error?" Michael asked. "Yes." "Without consulting the actual property owner?" "I sent him letters." "Certified letters that came back undelivered, correct?" "He should have been home." "He was working overseas, earning a living. You knew he was not home because the letters came back undelivered, yet you proceeded anyway. Is that correct?" Patricia's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Her deposition testimony made it clear that she had known there might be an ownership dispute, but had chosen to proceed with construction anyway, hoping I either would not find out or would not fight back. The special HOA election happened on a hot August evening in the clubhouse of a neighboring subdivision that agreed to host us. Almost every homeowner showed up, which was unprecedented. Patricia and her board members sat in the front row, looking defiant. Martin stood up and gave a presentation about the financial irregularities, the unauthorized construction project, and Patricia's general abuse of power. Then I stood and told my story, showing photos of the clubhouse built on my property, explaining the fraudulent amendment and describing the legal battle. When it came time to vote, the result was not even close. Patricia and her entire board were recalled by a vote of 183 to 12. A new interim board was elected on the spot, with Martin as the new president. Patricia stood up, red-faced and trembling. "You people have no idea what you are doing. This community needs leadership, needs someone willing to make tough decisions. You will all regret this." "The only regret here is that we let you get away with this for so long," Martin said firmly. "You are no longer president. Please surrender all HOA documents, passwords, and financial records to the new board immediately." Patricia refused, clutching her bag to her chest. "These are private HOA documents. You cannot just demand them." "Actually, we can. They belong to the HOA, not to you personally. If you do not turn them over, we will get a court order." She stormed out, taking her papers with her. The new board immediately hired a forensic accountant to review the HOA's finances. What they found was stunning. Over the past year, Patricia had spent nearly $600,000 of HOA money. The clubhouse construction accounted for about $400,000, but there was another $200,000 in questionable expenses, payments to her family members' companies for consulting, maintenance, and management services that may or may not have actually been performed. Martin brought this information to Michael, who added it to our case, and also forwarded it to the county attorney's office. This was starting to look less like a property dispute and more like embezzlement. My trial began on a Tuesday morning in September. The courtroom was packed with homeowners from Sonoran Hills, all eager to see what would happen. Judge Hernandez was presiding again, and she did not look pleased to see this case back in her courtroom. The trial lasted 3 days. Michael presented our case methodically: the deed, the survey, the county records, the original HOA charter, and the fraudulent amendment. He called a surveyor who testified that the clubhouse was definitely on my property. He called the county recorder, who explained that the HOA's amendment could not legally override my recorded deed. He called several homeowners who testified that they had never voted to approve the clubhouse project. Then he called Patricia to the stand. She was a terrible witness. She was defensive, argumentative, and condescending. When Michael asked her why she had filed an amendment claiming my property was common area, she said, "Because it should have been. That land was perfect for community use, and Mr. Mitchell was not using it. But it was not your decision to make, was it? I was acting in the best interests of the community. By taking someone's private property without permission? It was not really private. He was part of the HOA. Being part of an HOA does not mean you forfeit your property rights, does it?" Patricia's lawyer objected, but it was too late. She had basically admitted that she knew I owned the property, but decided to take it anyway because she thought it should be used differently. The HOA's defense was essentially that they had spent too much money to stop now and that the community would benefit from the clubhouse. Richard Lang argued that I should be compensated for the land, but that the clubhouse should be allowed to remain because tearing it down would be wasteful. Judge Hernandez was not buying it. On the third day, after closing arguments, she took less than an hour to issue her ruling from the bench. Dites, Frau. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of property rights violation I have seen," she began. "Mr. Mitchell owns the property in question. That is not in dispute, or at least it should not be. The deed is clear, the survey is clear, and the original HOA charter is clear. The defendant, HOA, under the leadership of Mrs. Ferguson, filed fraudulent documents with the county claiming ownership of property they did not own, obtained permits based on those fraudulent documents, and proceeded with construction despite having reason to know the property was privately owned. This is not a good faith mistake. This is a deliberate taking of private property." She looked directly at Patricia. "Mrs. Ferguson, your testimony made it abundantly clear that you knew exactly what you were doing. You decided that Mr. Mitchell's property would be better used for community purposes and simply took it, hoping he would not fight back. That is not how property rights work in America. You cannot simply decide you like someone's land and take it." Patricia started to speak, but Judge Hernandez held up her hand. "I am not finished. The court finds in favor of Mr. Mitchell on all counts. The defendant, HOA, is ordered to immediately remove the clubhouse structure from Mr. Mitchell's property and restore the land to its original condition. The defendant is further ordered to pay compensatory damages of $100,000 for trespass and harm to the property, and punitive damages of $300,000 for fraudulent conduct. The defendant is also ordered to pay Mr. Mitchell's attorney fees and costs." The courtroom erupted. Homeowners were cheering. Patricia looked like she might faint. Richard Lang was frantically scribbling notes. But Judge Hernandez was not done. "Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office for investigation of potential criminal charges related to the filing of fraudulent documents with the county recorder. Court is adjourned." I sat there, stunned. I had won. Completely. Michael was grinning. "That's about as total a victory as you can get. Congratulations." Over the next few weeks, the demolition of the clubhouse began. It was bittersweet watching it come down. In a way, it was a nice building, and it might have been a good clubhouse if they had built it on land they actually owned. But there was also satisfaction in seeing my property being restored. The new HOA board was cooperative throughout the process. They paid for the demolition and restoration out of the HOA's reserves, though they also filed a lawsuit against Patricia personally to recover the money. They canceled the contracts with her family members' companies and hired legitimate arm's-length contractors for actual HOA needs. The criminal investigation moved forward as well. The county attorney's office charged Patricia with fraud for filing false documents with the county recorder. They also charged her with embezzlement for the questionable payments to her family members. Her trial happened the following spring. I attended every day, sitting in the back of the courtroom and watching justice unfold. The evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution showed how she had systematically funneled HOA money to her relatives, used HOA funds for personal expenses, and deliberately filed fraudulent documents to seize my property for her pet project. Her defense was essentially that she had been trying to help the community and that any financial irregularities were just accounting errors. The jury did not buy it. They convicted her on 6 counts of fraud and 3 counts of embezzlement. At sentencing, the judge gave her 3 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA and to me. She was also banned from serving on any HOA board in Arizona for the rest of her life. As for me, I used some of the damages money to finally build that workshop I had always wanted on my back property. I had it positioned right where the clubhouse had been, as a reminder of what happens when people think they can take what is not theirs. The neighborhood settled down under Martin's leadership. The HOA went back to its proper role, maintaining common areas, organizing the occasional block party, and staying out of people's lives. The ridiculous fines stopped, the power trips ended. People actually started to enjoy living in Sonoran Hills again. I also started attending HOA meetings regularly. After everything that had happened, I realized that HOAs only become tyrannical when good people do not pay attention. If homeowners stay informed and involved, if they vote in elections and speak up about problems, then people like Patricia cannot gain power in the first place. Dave and I still sit on my back patio sometimes, drinking beer and looking out at the workshop where the clubhouse used to be. We laugh about it now, though it was not funny at the time. "You know what the craziest part is?" Dave said one evening. "She really thought she was going to get away with it. She thought she could just take your land, build her clubhouse, and you would either not notice or not care enough to fight." "She underestimated how much I love this property," I said. "I worked my whole life to buy this land. No way was I going to let anyone take it from me." "Well, you definitely made that clear." I think about that sometimes, about how close Patricia came to succeeding. If my neighbor had not emailed me, if I had not been able to get home quickly, if I had not had the resources to hire a good lawyer, if I had been intimidated by her threats and bluster, she might have actually gotten away with it. The clubhouse would be finished, the HOA would be using it, and my property would have been stolen. But that is not what happened. I came home, I pulled out my deed, and I fought back. And I won. The workshop is beautiful, by the way. I designed it myself, with plenty of space for all my tools and projects. I installed large windows facing east so I can watch the sunrise over the Sonoran Desert while I work. I put in air conditioning powerful enough to handle the Arizona heat. I built workbenches and storage and a small office area, and right by the door, framed on the wall, I hung a copy of my deed. The original is still safely locked away in my filing cabinet, but the copy serves as a daily reminder. This is my land. I own it. I have the papers to prove it, and anyone who tries to take it from me will face the same fate as Patricia. The neighborhood has thrived under the new HOA leadership. Martin served 2 years as president, then passed the role to another level-headed homeowner. They have kept dues reasonable, maintained the actual common areas properly, and avoided any grandiose schemes. There is no clubhouse, no pool, no tennis courts. Just a nice neighborhood where people own their homes and their land without harassment. Some people have asked me if I regret being so aggressive in fighting the HOA. They suggest maybe I could have compromised, maybe worked out a deal where the clubhouse could stay in exchange for compensation. But I do not see it that way. This was never about the clubhouse or about money. This was about the fundamental principle that you cannot take someone's property without permission. If I had compromised, if I had let them buy the land after the fact, it would have sent the message that you can steal first and negotiate later. That is not how a society based on property rights should work. Besides, Patricia was not interested in compromise. She was interested in power and control. Even if I had agreed to sell her the land, she would have just moved on to her next scheme, her next power grab. Someone had to stop her, and it ended up being me. The legal fees were substantial, even with the court-ordered reimbursement. Michael earned every penny. He fought for me at every stage, never backing down, always prepared, always professional. We have stayed in touch since the trial ended. He still sends me news articles occasionally about other HOA horror stories, usually with a note saying, "At least it is not as bad as what happened to you." He is right. What happened to me was extreme. Most HOA disputes do not involve someone literally building a structure on your property. Most are about paint colors and lawn care and parking rules. But the underlying dynamic is often the same. A small group of people gain a little bit of power and then abuse it, pushing boundaries, testing what they can get away with, bullying people who do not fight back. The solution is vigilance. Read your HOA bylaws, attend the meetings, vote in the elections, speak up when something is not right. And if you do find yourself in a situation where the HOA has genuinely violated your rights, do not be afraid to fight back, get a lawyer, document everything, stand your ground. I learned a lot about property law through this experience. I learned about deeds and surveys and easements and covenants. I learned about the difference between private property and common areas. I learned about the limits of HOA authority and what they can and cannot do. Most importantly, I learned that having the deed means something. It is not just a piece of paper. It is legal proof of ownership, enforceable in court. When I pulled out that deed and showed it to the judge, when I proved beyond any doubt that the land was mine, that was the moment I knew I would win. All of Patricia's bluster, all her claims about HOA authority and community needs and proper procedures, all of that evaporated in the face of that simple legal document that said, Marcus Donovan Mitchell owns Lot 47. The restoration of my back property took several months. The demolition company had to carefully remove the clubhouse structure without damaging the land more than necessary. They hauled away tons of concrete and building materials. Then, a landscaping company came in and regraded the lot, replanting native vegetation and trying to restore it to something close to its natural state. I worked with them closely on the restoration. I wanted specific native plants, Palo Verde trees, ocotillo, barrel cacti, and plenty of desert wildflowers that would bloom in the spring. I wanted it to look like the desert it was supposed to be, not some manicured golf course landscape. By the time they finished and I started building my workshop, you could barely tell there had ever been a clubhouse there. The land looked natural again, like it belonged to the desert, not to some HOA president's grandiose vision of a resort-style community. My workshop took 4 months to build. I hired a local contractor who had been recommended by several neighbors, a guy named Martin Moore, no relation to Martin Myers from the HOA board. He was professional and skilled, and he appreciated the irony of building on the exact spot where the illegal clubhouse had been. "I saw that clubhouse when it was going up," Martin Moore told me one day while we were reviewing the workshop plans. "I thought it was weird that it was so far back on your lot. I figured maybe you had sold some land to the HOA or something. Never occurred to me they had just built it without permission." "I still cannot believe they thought they would get away with it," I said. "People get crazy when they have a little power. I have worked in Scottsdale for 20 years, and I have seen some wild HOA stuff, but this takes the cake." The workshop was finished in March, almost exactly 2 years after I had first gotten that email from Dave. I threw a party to celebrate, inviting all the neighbors who had supported me through the legal battle. We grilled burgers, drank beer, and toasted to property rights. Martin Myers, the HOA president, gave a short speech. What Marcus went through was every homeowner's nightmare. But he fought back, and he won, and he made our neighborhood better in the process. Because of him, we have a functioning HOA now, one that actually serves the homeowners instead of some power-hungry board member. So here is to Marcus, and here is to standing up for what is right. Everyone cheered. I felt embarrassed but also proud. I had stood up for myself, and it had made a difference. Dave pulled me aside later in the evening. "You know Patricia got out on bail pending her appeal?" "I heard. I'm not worried about it. The conviction was solid. She has been telling anyone who will listen that she was railroaded, that you and the HOA conspired against her. Let her talk. The facts speak for themselves. Just be careful, man. She seems pretty bitter." I took his warning seriously, but I was not about to live in fear. Patricia had already lost everything: her position, her reputation, her freedom pending the appeal. There was nothing more she could do to me, or so I thought. About 2 weeks after the workshop party, I woke up one morning to find graffiti spray painted across my garage door, "Thief," in large red letters. I called the police immediately. The responding officer took photos and a report, but without witnesses or security camera footage, there was not much they could do. The officer asked if I had any idea who might have done it. "I have a suspicion," I said, "but I cannot prove it." "Is this related to that HOA case I read about?" "Probably. I will include that in the report. You might want to install some security cameras." I took his advice. That afternoon, I had a security company install cameras covering my driveway, front door, garage, and the path leading to my back property. If someone came back, I would have video evidence. They came back 2 nights later. The motion-activated cameras caught everything. It was not Patricia herself, but her adult son, a guy in his 20s who drove up at 2 in the morning and tried to pour paint thinner on my workshop door. The cameras caught his face, his license plate, everything. I called the police with the footage. They arrested him the next day. He was charged with vandalism and attempted arson. When they questioned him, he admitted his mother had put him up to it, told him I had ruined her life and deserved to be punished. That admission was enough to charge Patricia with conspiracy to commit vandalism. Her bail was revoked, and she went back to jail to await her appeal. The appeal was eventually denied, and she served her full 3-year sentence. Her son took a plea deal, got probation and community service, and had to pay for the cleanup and damages. I actually felt a little bad for him. He had just been trying to help his mother, but she had manipulated him into committing crimes. After that incident, things finally calmed down. No more vandalism, no more threats, no more drama. Just life in a normal neighborhood with a normal HOA. I settled into a comfortable routine. I worked remotely for a new petroleum engineering firm, one that did not require me to spend months at a time overseas. I spent my weekends in my workshop, building furniture and working on various projects. I dated a little bit, but nothing serious. Mostly, I just enjoyed my property, my 2 acres of Arizona desert that I had fought so hard to protect. Sometimes I walked the boundaries of my land, following the survey markers, reminding myself that this is mine. Every square foot, every cactus, every rock. I own it legally and completely. No HOA, no government entity, no one can take it from me without due process and just compensation. That is what the law protects. That is what I fought for. And that is what I won. The neighborhood continues to do well. Property values have actually increased since the Patricia drama ended and the new HOA board took over. People want to live in a community where the HOA is reasonable and respectful, not tyrannical and corrupt. Martin Myers stepped down as HOA president after his term ended, satisfied that he had helped right the ship. The next president was a retired teacher named Margaret Flynn, and she's been equally sensible and level-headed. The HOA now publishes detailed financial reports every quarter, holds open board meetings, and actively solicits input from homeowners before making any major decisions. It is what an HOA should be. I think about writing a book sometimes, telling the full story of what happened. But I worry it might come across as self-aggrandizing or bitter. I am not bitter anymore. I won. My property is intact. Justice was served. There is no reason to be bitter. But maybe there is value in telling the story as a warning to others, both to homeowners about the importance of protecting their rights and to HOA board members about the limits of their authority. Maybe someone else will read it and be inspired to stand up when their HOA oversteps. Or maybe an HOA board member will read it and think twice before abusing their power. For now, though, I am content to just live my life. I go to work, I build things in my workshop, I have barbecues with my neighbors, and I sleep well at night knowing that my land is mine. Every once in a while, someone new moves into the neighborhood, and they inevitably hear the story of the clubhouse that used to be on my back property. They always ask me about it, and I give them the short version. The HOA tried to build a clubhouse on my land without permission. I came home from overseas and stopped them. We went to court, and I won. The looks on their faces are always priceless. Shock, disbelief, solidarity, sometimes anger on my behalf. And then almost always, they ask the same question. How did you find the strength to fight them? My answer is always the same. It is my land. What else was I going to do? Because really, what else could I do? Roll over and let them take it, accept some inadequate compensation after the fact, walk away from property I had worked years to afford? No. When someone tries to take what is yours, you fight back. You document everything, you get a good lawyer, you stand your ground, and you fight back. It might be expensive, it might be stressful, it might consume your life for a while. But in the end, if you are right, if the law is on your side, you will win. I won because I had the deed. I had the proof. I had the truth on my side. No amount of HOA bluster or fancy lawyers or fraudulent amendments could change the fundamental fact that the land was mine. That is the power of property rights. That is the power of the rule of law, and that is why I fought so hard to protect both. My workshop is my favorite place now. I spend hours there every week working on various projects. I've built dining tables, bookshelves, a desk for my home office, and gifts for friends and neighbors. The work is meditative, satisfying in a way that petroleum engineering never quite was. There is something profound about taking raw materials and transforming them into something beautiful and useful with your own hands. And every time I am in there, sawing wood or sanding a surface or applying finish, I am reminded that I am standing on my land, in my building, doing what I choose to do. No one can tell me otherwise. No HOA can find me for how my workshop looks or what I build in it. This is my private property, and I have the deed to prove it. Sometimes I take out that framed copy of the deed hanging by the door and just look at it. The legal language is dense and formal, but the meaning is clear. This land belongs to Marcus Donovan Mitchell. All 2.03 acres of it. It was purchased legally, recorded properly, and defended successfully against those who tried to take it. That piece of paper, that deed, is more than just a legal document. It is the embodiment of a principle that goes back centuries in common law. A person's property is their own, sacred and inviolable except through proper legal process. Patricia learned that lesson the hard way. The HOA learned it too. And every time someone new hears my story, they learn it as well. I hope they never have to experience what I went through. I hope their HOAs are reasonable and respectful. I hope they never have to hire a lawyer and go to court to protect what is rightfully theirs. But if they do, I hope they remember my story. I hope they remember that it is possible to fight back, to win, to protect your property and your rights, even when it seems like the whole system is against you. Because I did it. I came home from overseas, found a clubhouse being built on my land, pulled out my deed, and fought back. And I won. That is my story. That is what happened when the HOA built a clubhouse on my land while I was overseas. They learned a very expensive lesson about property rights, and I learned a valuable lesson about standing up for what is mine. The neighborhood is better for it. I am stronger for it. And my 2 acres of Arizona desert remain exactly what they were always meant to be. Mine.